Hi. It's been a long time since I've recorded anything for this vlog. I said I was going to do a series of myself reading my grandmother's book, and then I never did that because life just got in the way and I was feeling insecure about recording myself and putting myself out there in that way. But I decided to just go ahead and continue doing it, mainly just for my family, especially my aunt, because she watched the first one and I know that she likes these stories, and and for my own sake, just for getting to know my grandma more. And I still do regret not ever having read this book, but also I was pretty young when it came out, and it just, I don't know, the idea of having to read her book, it just made me sad. And I already am a little bit sad of the idea of reading about a person who's no longer here that actually has something to do with me. So I am just going to get started and hopefully keep this up. I just got to make time to do this every week and record and edit it, and okay. Today we're reading chapters 3 and 4 of the book. I had a previous recording of these chapters, and I just didn't like them that much, and I wanted to do it again with a proper recording. So here goes. Chapter 3, Cambridge. My parents graduated together in 1931, in the time of the Great Depression in the United States. Unemployment was widespread, and bankrupt businessmen were jumping off roofs. Nonetheless, Del and Jay were full of optimism. Del found a job teaching in a little one-room rural school. Most of the children were Portuguese and very affectionate. They would vie to hold her left hand with the engagement ring on it. One day, one of the little girls grabbed the other hand with its withered little finger and declared, "I've got the hand with the little finger." In 1932, Jay and Del were married at a church in Stockton, California. In the picture, her satin wedding gown looks very 30s beautiful, and she is carrying a large spray of white flowers. Jay had a job offer as a fundraiser for a public relations firm in Boston. It was a temporary job, but carried the opportunity of permanent work, an excellent opportunity in the Depression. He was planning to look over the situation and then go back and get Del if it looked good. Del got tired of waiting for him, packed up all of her things in a large trunk, and started off to Boston by bus. When the bus got to New York, the bus driver declared at the end of the line. Del gathered up her 5-2 self and demanded to be taken to Boston as agreed. After some argument, they put her and her trunk on a bus to Boston and into the arms of Jay. Jay had toyed with becoming a professional actor after graduation. A troupe was forming and they wanted him to join. He was an intelligent actor and had a good look for the era, lean and tall, sensitive face, wavy blonde hair. However, Jay saw acting as a very rocky profession and decided to bet on economy, failing as it was. While in Boston, Jay conceived the idea of going to Harvard Business School for their 2-year program. HBS knew nothing about his California college. They looked over his excellent record of the College of the Pacific and declared, "We have no idea what this means." Nonetheless, they accepted him. He graduated summa cum laude. Del kept a diary while they were in Cambridge and wrote, "It was the bitterest cold winter of many years in Cambridge, Massachusetts, so we were told. Jay and I had been married about a year when Jay was sent from California to Boston. We had been out of college barely a year, and Jay had an interesting job offered in Boston. It was the middle of the Depression, and there really were some former businessmen reduced to selling apples on the street. We felt lucky and excited about the interesting job possibility. Jay had a letter from Mr. Pierce asking him to reconsider before making plans for going to school. New contracts are opening, and he wants Jay. It's a temptation in a way not to give up a good salary for the uncertainty of this year in school, but we think we should continue our plans even at a sacrifice. Now is the time to do what we've always wanted to have Jay do. Hope it succeeds. Finding a place to stay was their next problem. Their resources were limited, and Dell was having trouble finding a job. Their first rented room was in the lodge house. The Lodges were fine old Boston family, but even they had to rent out parts of the house to make ends meet. It was a beautiful room, but ultimately too expensive for Jay and Dell. Mrs. Bemis, a recent widow, afraid to be alone, was looking for someone to share her house. Dell wrote, "Jay called from the subway station and asked me to be ready to move over to Mrs. Bemis's. Misunderstood him. Thought he said, have lunch ready. So did have it ready, but no packing." Jay, all enthused, pushed plans ahead. Mrs. Bemis too upset by grief for her husband to know which way to turn. Jay and I cleaned and worked hard while she was away to surprise her. Our room, not a room yet, just a storage place. Mrs. Bemis, who wore a red wig and long, voluminous skirts, kept her husband's Sanskrit books strapped together on a table in the living room. Her house was large and cold, and she would sit over the floor grate, spreading her skirt out around her, and tell Jay to go to the basement and add more coal to the furnace. Sometimes the water box above the toilet would freeze, and Jay would have to pour boiling water into it. The room that Dell and Jay rented was pretty cheerless, so they decided to paint and paper it. Dell wrote, "Began working a little on cleaning things in our room. We can do little until Mrs. Bemis sorts things over. It is filled with antiques and old furniture, etc. It seems an endless job, but we have enthusiastic plans for repapering, etc. Jay and I went into Boston and spent all afternoon looking for wallpaper and lamps, etc. for our room. Came home all excited over our purchases. This morning, decided we'd paper the closet so as to have a nice clean place to put our things before working on the room. We are only amateurs at the job and found it not as easy as we imagined. Jay and I worked diligently and had fun doing it together. Jay is indefatigable in his labor and keeps me jumping to keep up with him. But we did enjoy doing things together so much, and he's a peacherino. We tried experimenting by putting paste on one wall instead of paper. Result? Beautiful rippled effect. It looks nice all in all, however, and we feel encouraged to try other things." Dell wanted to add cheerful curtains, but Mrs. Bemis was horrified, since all of the curtains were the same from the outside. When Dell contrived a way to have her curtains on a different rod inside the outer curtains, Mrs. Bemis was delighted and told Dell she was very clever. One day, Mrs. Bemis was speaking of her departed husband. A fine figure of a man. To Dell's amazement, she pulled out a picture of him standing on a rock completely naked. Yes, a fine figure of a man. It was a mixed blessing living with Mrs. Bemis, Dell wrote. Mrs. B. very kindly gave us 2 tickets to the symphony. Yashka Heifetz was the violin soloist. He was quite wonderful. We enjoyed it immensely. We appreciate her kindness very much. She is really very nice, even though she is filled with fear complexes, such as being robbed, burned, asphyxiated, and whatnot. She's almost a fanatic on keeping everything under lock and key, but otherwise is very sweet and kind. She is very cultured, and we enjoy talking with her. Mrs. Bemis would not give them a key to the house. "Oh, Mr. Smith, you mean me in here and you out there with a key?" One night she lost her only key and couldn't get into the house. Dell and Jay had gone to bed early, wrapping themselves in a carpet to keep warm. They didn't hear her until finally she began to throw rocks at their window. After that, she gave them a key. Their relationship with Mrs. Bemis became a little difficult. At last, got the paint for our room. Mrs. B was nasty about it because we didn't buy it ourselves. We felt it was not our place to do so after we paid for wallpaper, calcimine paint, etc. Poor lady. I understand her, and I like her, but at times she is so small. Jay and I felt like throwing the paint out the window. Mrs. B and Jay are continually upsetting each other. She can be very rude and small, and I see red when she says disagreeable things to Jay, but I try not to show it even to Jay. No use until we find something else to do. Jay and I are absolutely happy together. Wish we could be ourselves. We don't like being here very much. I don't know that anyone is really much to blame, except we see things differently from Mrs. B, and would prefer having more privacy than just being alone. I want to leave, but I don't want to hurt Mrs. B. Guess it will work out in time. On their first Christmas Eve in Boston, Jay and Dell walked over to the venerable houses on Beacon Hill. It was the custom at the time for the houses to have open house for anyone who came by. Dell remembers looking in the lighted windows and falling in love with the warmth and beauty of the interiors. In fact, she fell in love with the whole East Coast. Dell wrote, Jay and I went to Harvard Memorial Church. Lovely, most inspiring sermon by a man from Canada. First time I've heard a minister pray for King George of England as well as our own president. We had a delicious dinner for Jay's birthday. Biscuits and everything. The cake was good, too. Jay is sweet. I'd like to give him something nice, but he knows how I love him. And what more can we ask of life than just being happy together? The minister this morning ended with a beautiful prayer. May we be loyal to the best we know. Dell worked for Sage's Groceries for a while, but she couldn't seem to find a permanent job. She felt that her life was on hold and wrote in her diary of her discouragement. I am happy that Jay is happy in his work. I can fairly see him growing and expanding under the marvelous influence and opportunities he has here, but sometimes I feel so apart from it. I have nothing that I can put energy into with all my heart and soul as he has. I have to watch myself to keep from contracting. My chief happiness lies in having a home to keep and a baby in the meantime. I feel as though I'm sitting here blindfolded with my hands tied and watching life go by. Then I realize that it is only a state of mind, and that if I allow myself to stagnate, as it were, it is my own fault. I need to learn to overcome my own impatient spirit. God, make me a pillar, not a pillow. You give me such big, beautiful ideas sometime. Now give me some more backbone instead of so much wishbone. Dell found another temporary job with an advertisement research company and set about learning the punch code that recorded data gathered for research. The work was boring, and learning the code looked like a challenge. She went home the first day in tears. The temperature was 18 below, a 69-year record, and pipes in the apartment had frozen. To her relief, she found that she could learn to write code at work quickly. But she suffered a setback when she broke her glasses. A major calamity, she wrote. Can't work without them, and can't buy new ones until I'm sure of a job. That weekend, she lost her temper with Jay. Today I was a bad girl. Lost my temper at Jay. The first time since we've been married. We were both dreadfully hurt at quarreling, although I was the only one who quarreled. So awfully ashamed of myself. Jay finally forgave me. I feel a little bit better, but sorry. There's some, I don't know if you can hear on the mic, but I have this paper, and my elderly cat is tearing it apart. I'm just gonna keep going, and if she does it again, then maybe I'll try to film it. Okay, hold on. What are you doing? You playing with the paper? Her brother's right here. You like the paper? You're a sweet girl. He's a sweet girl. He's a sweet boy. Okay, resuming. I can't bear to quarrel with Jay, nor he with me. I thought about it contritely all day, and Jay must have too. For the first thing he did when he came in was to apologize and tell me what a good boy he was going to be. Then we both tried to make it up to the other. They say making up is the best part of a quarrel, but I don't want to let those things happen very often. There is no reason to hurt those we love, and we do love each other. Dell worked for a while in the bakery department at Sage's Groceries, but then found another job doing most enjoyable work in the clipping department at the business school. She ended up working in the library there. There were good times. Jay and Dell loved shopping together and bringing home ingredients that she would fashion into a meal. They entertained friends. They did enjoy each other very much. There hadn't been much frivolity in Jay's childhood, even at holiday time, but Dell brought out a playful spirit in Jay. I was lying on the bed, talking to Jay with my feet at the head, thumping the pillow when my foot struck something hard. I flipped the pillow over, and there sat a darling little blue and white bunny with a pink ribbon around his neck. He was sitting on a note reading, "I've laid 6 eggs in this room." What an Easter egg hunt I had! Jay laughed at my denseness, but I finally found them all. 2 hard-boiled eggs, 2 magazines, a box of peanut brittle, and a huge chocolate bar. It was so much fun, and I loved Jay for doing it. Money doesn't count when you are living with someone who is dear and a thoughtful friend, who loves you no matter how silly you are. Jay and Dell decided to move from Mrs. Bemis's house. This time they found a room with a sweet old Irish lady who remembered fondly when her dear departed husband used to go down to the polls to pay the voters for their votes. Jay was working very hard, but he wasn't sure if his work was good enough. Dell wrote, "I suppose this is about our lowest ebb. Jay doesn't know whether it is going to pay him to stick it out or not. Only the very highest graduates get considered for unusual jobs when they graduate, and Jay doesn't know yet whether he is doing distinction work in spite of his efforts. It makes me panicky for him to feel that way, for I have such confidence in his ability, and he has always been high in his class, so I can't think of him doing anything else." 2 days later, Jay came home with good news. He had talked with his advisor and was told that he was doing splendid work and that he should stay even if it meant borrowing money to live on. Eventually, Jay graduated with a distinction and his thesis was printed in the Harvard Review. He wrote his thesis about the future of American film in foreign markets, and it was eventually published as Problems in Marketing American Films Abroad. The review didn't like his original title, which I think is much better. Must Mickey Mouse Stay at Home? In June of 1934, Dell wrote his last entry in her diary. Tuesday afternoon, Jay took his last exam, and we left dear old Cambridge in great exultation. We felt exactly as though we were starting out on a high adventure, as indeed we were. We were saying goodbye to Cambridge forever, so we thought, and starting our new life in Philadelphia. All right, so that was chapter 3. So now we start on chapter 4. It's called Winchester. And I do remember when I read this before, there's a lot of stuff about music. So I'm excited. If you don't know me at all, I am a musician. I have a degree in opera, and I'm looking into masters in vocal pedagogy because I am primarily a singer, and I do musical theater and I sing or songwrite, and right now my current job is music teaching full-time, and then I do gigs on top of that. So yeah, I feel a certain amount of connection every time I read about my grandparents and music and everything. Chapter 5. Winchester. My brother and I were on the carpet. We could smell supper cooking in the kitchen. Dad was learning to play the piano. They asked me how I knew my true love was true. Dad loved Mom. They both loved us. I really can't remember anymore. Smoke gets in your eyes. I actually don't know how that song goes. But that was like a little pre-thing before the chapter. When you move a lot as a child, your memories wrap themselves around the houses you lived in, each so different, each attached to a different place. My eternally optimistic parents greeted each move as an adventure, a new job challenge for Dad and a new house to decorate for Mom. My mother was an interior decorator at heart, and soon showed a talent for finding interesting houses and doing just the right things to make them charming and family-friendly. Just out of business school, Dad took a job with an advertising agency in Philadelphia. I was born there in 1936. Mother said that I seemed to be an introspective baby. When I was about 10 months old, Mother remembers putting me on a little blanket where I stayed quietly as long as there were people in the room. Later, when our first son Matt was born, I marveled at this story since our son Matt wouldn't have stayed 30 seconds on that blanket. That's my dad. We left Philadelphia when I was a year old, so I don't really have any memories of Philadelphia. Years later, going across the Canadian border, I was asked unexpectedly where I was born. There was a long pause while I thought of all the places I had lived in before coming up with Philadelphia. I must have sounded pretty suspicious. While we were in Philadelphia, Dad received a call from the heir to Payne Furniture Company in Boston, a large, stately furniture store in downtown Boston. Dad had tutored him while they were both at Harvard. Now he had inherited the store, and he invited my father to come be his treasurer. My parents were pretty excited. At first, we rented a house in Winchester, where Ty was born about 18 months after I was. Mother says I alarmed her by throwing my favorite little truck in the bassinet and saying, "Hello, baby." When I was about 3 years old, I thought that God was a woman, lovely and gentle like my mother, and beautiful like Snow White's real mother. My mother had read Snow White to me, and there was a picture of Snow White's real mother, a lovely young queen in a long gown sitting by the castle window, quietly embroidering. That Christmas, my mother took me and Ty, who was 2, into the sitting room and told us that she was going to teach us a song. It was about a little baby who was born in a barn. Mother got out a book, and there was a picture of someone who looked very much like Snow White's mother. She, too, was dressed in a long gown, but she was looking down at a little baby lying in a bed made of hay. Mother explained that the page next to the picture contained a special kind of writing, which told people what notes to sing. I was both fascinated and delighted. Mother said that the song was called "Away in a Manger." The manger was a place in a barn, and this was where the little baby was born. Mother taught us gestures for each part of the song. We got Ty's bingo bed, a wooden toy shaped like a small bed with pegs that could be pounded from one side to the other. We wrapped up one of my dolls in a little blanket and placed him in the bingo bed. I loved singing the song, but it was my toddler brother Ty who stole the show. I remember Ty standing on a chair and pointing down at the bingo bed. "Away in a manger," he piped. Then he shook his head. "No crib for his bed." Then Ty rested his head in his hands and sang, "The little George Jesus laid down his sweet head." Ty never again showed much interest in performing, but he was quite a hit at the Christmas of '39. Dad became the youngest president ever of the Back Bay Association of Merchants, and when it was apparent that things were going well at Payne's, Mom found us another house in Winchester. This one, as she said later, her favorite of all of our houses. It was roomy, shingled, gabled, and full of surprises. I loved the window seat in my bedroom, with bookcases on either side, a perfect place for reading. My brother Ty's room had built-in bunks and an inlaid compass on the floor. There was a library and a picture window that looked out across the back lawn to a pond where we could skate in the winter and come back to the house for cocoa. There was a large paneled family room with a fireplace where my mother liked to give parties. On Sundays, she would invite friends over to ice skate, then serve them waffles afterward. She had an Italian-themed night where everyone helped cook spaghetti and set up the tables with checkered tablecloths and wicker-wrapped bottles with a candle in the center. I remember she gave a dance party where everyone dressed as a character from a book. An 18th century book, Fanny Hill, or Memoirs of a Woman of Pleasure, was enjoying a revival at the time, so Mother wore a long black dress with a sign saying Hill on her derriere. A lot has been written in recent years about the discontented stay-at-home housewives of decades past. That does not describe Mother. She was where she wanted to be doing the job she wanted to do. I would say that she had a gift for making a home and raising children, and she threw herself into the job. Ty and I pretended that we were a family just like Mom and Dad. We liked to play with Elmo, an old red-headed wooden doll that belonged to my father. Elmo was my favorite toy when I was little, and I would call him Melmo. We still have it somewhere. It was very well loved. We were having such a good time that Mother felt she needed to tell Ty that we wouldn't get married when we grew up. Ty was upset. Then, where will my babies come from? Mother told him that one day he would meet and marry a remarkable girl. He did. After a while, a little girl named Marianne moved in next door. She was a year younger than Ty, an only child to older parents, and she looked like a little doll with her bangs and Dutch boy haircut. When Ty and I went over to meet her, he bit her. "Why did you do that, Ty?" asked our mother. "She wouldn't let me sit next to Pam." Poor Marianne. She really couldn't keep up with us. She would make preposterous little girl statements. "It's not a stretcher. It's a liar down." Then she would cite the ultimate authority. "My father's dictionary says so." When Ty said, "There is no Santa Claus. It's your mother and father," she replied, "Then who comes down the chimney?" In the summer, a girl named Carol would show up at her grandparents' house across the street. She was 3 years older than I and full of ideas. We would endlessly rehearse dances in her family playroom. They had a player piano, and our favorite role was, "Yes, we have no bananas." We would put on a performance for kindly mothers in the neighborhood who came to our house for our dance program and refreshments. We had a stack of records a mile high. After a couple, my mother led the applause and declared it time for lemonade and cookies. Another time, we staged a wedding. Carol was the minister, I was the bride, and her younger brother was the groom. The next year, when they returned at Christmas, I thought he was very bratty. When we were ice skating, he declared, "I divorce you." "I divorce you," I returned. Back at the house, I asked my mother what that meant, and when she told me, I was glad. My father always wanted a sailboat, so he got a small one, which he kept at Marblehead. My mother wasn't that excited about sailing, but she would gamely go with him. One Saturday, Dad decided to enter a race from Marblehead around an island and back. Dad pored over the chance and concluded that the best route would be in the opposite direction from the one the other boats were taking, so off they started in that direction. When they arrived back at port, there was no one in sight. They were convinced that they had lost miserably until the rest of the fleet rounded the island and headed for port. It was one of life's little triumphs. Dad won an engraved pewter dish. One of their friends painted a watercolored cartoon of a smiling dad at the wheel, with Mom rather improperly leaning out from the jib sheet, 1 foot in the air, a jaunty figure in bell-bottom pants. About that time, Dad decided to learn to play the piano. He found an excellent teacher who taught him to play by improvising on the guitar sides above each measure. He also wrote out some songs for Dad. I still have the music of the haunting arrangement he made for Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. I remember Dad playing the song while Mother was getting supper. Whenever I hear it, a great sense of well-being descends over me. When I was 5, Mom and Dad took me alone on a trip with them down to Florida. They took motion pictures, and it's all there. The stop at Williamsburg, the little circus with the contortionists, the elephant ride into the jungle, the Seminole Indian Reservation. There is a scene where Mother and I, fully dressed, run together to the brink of the ocean and then scurry back before the waves return. In the final scene, taken after we return to Winchester, the ground is covered in snow and Ty and I are bundled up in our snowsuits, running about in the snow. One Christmas, I was given a string to follow to a secret destination. When I came to the end, I screamed with delight. There was a fuzzy little gray and white kitten. Dad took the kitten to carry downstairs for me. I ran down the hall, shrieking with joy, and threw my leg over the banister to slide down and landed on the wooden floor a story below. I remember how shocking the thud was. My usually calm father ran rapidly down the stairs and picked me up. He carried me to a large easy chair in the living room where I lay in his lap until my crying stopped, and it was apparent that I wasn't hurt at all. I was 5 that year, and Mother decided to have a young woman paint a pastel chalk portrait of me. I remember sitting very still while the artist worked on the painting. My hair was in braids, and I was wearing a light blue dress with a white collar. On one of our visits to her studio, we passed a very serious accident on the road. I remember Mother whispering to the young artist that she thought the driver was dead. a puzzling idea to ponder while I was sitting still for the portrait. I have the portrait today. It resides behind the baby grand piano that Dad used to play. We still have both of those things. We have Nana's painting, and we also have the baby grand piano, and I feel like those are two things that our family is never going to part with, because it's just, they're so old now. The piano itself is probably over 100 years old, and it still has ivory keys and everything. Soon Ty and I were walking to school together. He went to kindergarten, I to first grade. His teacher told my mother that I would take Ty to the door every morning and kiss him goodbye. However, our perfect little family of 4 was not to last. One February, Mark, an affable red-headed baby boy, appeared. Dad was delighted. "Look, Pam, isn't he adorable?" I wasn't so sure. He was followed a year later by Cal, blonde, equally affable and adorable. Mother was always very hands-on, but she was pretty exhausted. A nurse named Mrs. Ackison, Aki to us, arrived to help Mother and Mrs. Moore, the good soul who lived with us and worked as our maid. With Mrs. Moore was her pretty daughter Virginia, who was 3 years older than I, and occasionally joined us in our play. Aki mainly took care of the babies, but sometimes she would make us lemon meringue pie. This is a side note. I keep having to restart, so I have this new camera that I'm using to record this because I just didn't want to do this on my phone anymore. So I got the Canon V10 PowerShot, and it is very cute, and I need to try what it's like to take it out into public. I'm going to New York next week for a vocal competition, and I'm gonna take it with me and try to just vlog, and it'll be probably short bursts where I turn on the camera and then I turn it off. And I'm thinking that that's going to be way better for this. So if you decide that you want a Canon V10 PowerShot, this is just I'll link it below. So far, I like the quality. I guess once I start editing this video, I'll see. But the only thing that I don't like is that if it's sitting there and it's on 4K, I literally have it on the lightest setting for 4K. It gets overheated really fast and then it shuts down. It does save where it left off when it shut down, so at least I haven't been losing content, but it does do that. So if you like a wide angle and you want something small and something you can take around, I'll see as I record more things with this how I feel. But right now it does give you a warning that if it sits at that setting, it will overheat and shut down. So far it has been doing that over and over again, and I am a little bit annoyed, but I literally only have basically 2 pages left. So, okay, here we go. Back to where I know that it got cut off. Things fell apart a little bit. I had 2 head cuts requiring stitches. The first was from a croquet set that Dad had brought home. Left alone with it, Ty and I began to improvise. We reckoned that the clubs should be used like golf clubs. Ty accidentally hit me on the backswing. Later, I was trying to make stilts out of wooden crutches left in the house from Mother's ski accident. I stood on a chair, put 1 foot on each hand brace, took 1 step, and fell on the corner of the wall. I went downstairs bleeding and crying to Aki, expecting to be brushed off, but was gratified by her alarmed response. I still have 2 little scars in the hairline on the front of my head. Worst of all, I turned to crime. One morning I was left alone in the kindergarten room at recess as a punishment for talking at the wrong time. I sat on my chair with the clock slowly clicking the time. I seemed to be there forever. After a while I got up and went to the teacher's storage closet. What fabulous things I found! There was a box piled with gorgeous ribbons in all colors. I took some ribbons and put them in my locker. A week or so later, when the teachers were checking the lockers, they found all the ribbons and telephoned my parents. Mother gently probed for answers and reasons. More traumatically, I had a serious talk with my father, one of 3. The other 2 were when I was a teenager. Dad said that he didn't know if he was going to be able to trust me again. I guess I got the attention I wanted, but that was the end of my life of crime. I didn't want to disappoint Dad. In later years, when I reminded Dad of this incident, a source for me of guilt and trauma, he said he didn't remember it. Mother and Dad still loved the theater. Once he sat me down and told me about an amazing musical he had just seen. The stage opened and there was a young man singing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning." All the music and the dancing seemed to progress organically from the story. These days, it's hard for young people to imagine what an innovation it was then. At one point, the play must have been called Away We Go, because I have an old copy of The Surrey with the Fringe on Top, and that is the title of the show on the cover. Amazingly, Libby Plum, an American friend in London, later told me exactly the same story. One night, at bedtime, my father sat down at the edge of the bed and told me about a wonderful musical he had just seen. When I was about 8, Dad received a shocking letter from his parents in California. They were getting divorced. Actually, my grandfather James left the marriage. His wife Billy told Mother, "When he asked me for a divorce, I just curled up and died inside." She had become very involved with a sort of cult, which consumed all of her time, and James didn't think she wanted or needed him any longer. My father was heartbroken. Mother urged him to write his parents. Mother felt that the divorce was some sort of mistake, and that the letter from Jay might change their minds. But Dad felt he shouldn't interfere, and he never wrote them. Grandmother Billy died not too many years after that. My grandfather went to San Francisco and lived a number of years in a residential hotel. When I was in college, I visited him there, and we walked all over San Francisco together. Eventually, Gramp moved to Westport, where he lived the last years of his long life with my parents. One day, I heard my parents quietly talking about something very serious they had heard on the radio. My mother explained that he had been attacked at a place called Pearl Harbor, and our country would be going to war. Although he was 30 and had 4 children, my father felt obligated to join the Coast Guard. When his colorblindness proved a problem, he transferred to the Navy and went down to Washington to work in the Bureau of Supplies and Accounts at the Navy Department. We left Mom's favorite house in Winchester and rented a large house next to a farm in Bethesda, Maryland. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. The Winchester house was later bought by someone who owned several dance halls. Mother somewhat scornfully described him as the Dance King. He painted the weathered shingles of the house white and sold off some of the land. After that, my mother never wanted to see the house again. "You can't go back," she said. So I actually did a production of Oklahoma whenever I was in high school, and I played Lori. And in our production, during the "Oh, what a beautiful morning," because it's the first thing that happens in the show, one of our cast members had a horse, and so our Curly came in. He was either on a horse or he was walking the horse. I don't remember, but we did have a horse, and it did poop on the stage, so that was interesting. Anyway, that is, my camera's about to die, so I gotta wrap this up. I've had a lot of troubles today filming this, but overall, I'm glad that I have recorded these chapters, and I am going to keep doing this because I want to continue to do this project, and also maybe come up with more projects. I'm like in the rabbit hole of Reddit, but I kind of want to do like a paranormal spooky thing where I find spooky stories, or maybe tell my own spooky stories and record it and post it. So yeah, that was chapters 3 and 4. So next time I'll do 5 and 6 and so on and so forth. But if you liked hearing my grandma's story, keep listening. There's chapters 1 and 2 on a different video on my same channel. So yeah, if you liked hearing me speak, you might also like hearing me sing. So my name is Nicole Meriden on all of my online platforms, but I have music on all streaming platforms too. If you want to listen to that, it's very different. And you can also go to another channel that is linked down below, which is just like all of my performance videos that I've been posting since I was like in 5th grade or whatever. But thank you for watching, and I hope that you watch the next video whenever I put it out. I'm going to try to do everything once a week. I just got to get on top of it. But anyway, bye!